The flames consume everything in their path, a ravenous and relentless force that devours the silence. But it's not silence that fills my ears. It's the desperate cries of my people, a haunting symphony born from their current agony. Who did this? These flames, these screams. Who could have done this? And yet I know. Deep inside, beneath the hunger, I know. I hear someone calling my name, but I don't remember it anymore. My name. It used to be Mashkawizi, but names are for the living, and I am not entirely sure what I am anymore.
Welcome, curious soul, to Tales of the Tattered Book. I am your host, the keeper of the book. With each passing moment, new horrors appear on these weathered pages, yearning to be told. As I open this arcane tome, remember, knowledge comes at a price, and some truths are better left unspoken. Tonight, dear listeners, we delve into a tale of transformation, hunger, and the primal forces that lurk in the frozen wilderness. Gather close to the fire, for tonight we present to you Windigo.
The bonfire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the weathered face of my uncle as he looked at me. I raised my head at the sky. The moon hung low, casting an ethereal blue glow on the surrounding forest. Awful night for hunting.
Uncle Newton,
I whispered, curiosity burning bright in my chest.
the seasons have turned enough times. Tell me about the Windigo.
Ah, my dear Mashkawizi.
My uncle sighed. His eyes seemed to search the darkness beyond the fire, as if seeking an excuse to avoid this moment. But he knew, as I did, that this tale could not be held back forever.
Listen carefully. The Windigo is not just a story to frighten children. It is a warning passed down through our people, a spirit born of winter's cruelest hunger and man's darkest greed.
He stirred the fire, sparks dancing upward like fleeing spirits. His voice grew deeper, older somehow, as he began.
Many moons ago, two young hunters, cousins but close like brothers, were tracking a great stag through the winter forest. The trail was leading them to a cave, and the hunters, caught in the thrill of the chase, followed the animal. Deeper and deeper they went, until daylight became just a memory. Soon they found themselves lost in the cave's endless darkness.
He paused, his gaze distant, as if lost in the memory. I could almost feel the dampness of the caves, the oppressive darkness, the panic that this would have caused.
The hunger grew stronger, and with each passing day, desperation started to take hold, until one night, one cousin killed the other, feeding on his own blood and flesh.
My uncle's hands trembled slightly as he stirred the dying fire. As if in protest, the fire popped and sent a shower of embers flying upwards. For a brief moment, they danced against the star-filled sky before disappearing into oblivion.
With that act, he became something twisted, something monstrous. He returned to the village and delivered the news, but he lied about his cousin's fate, claiming he had fallen into a pit. The entire tribe mourned the loss of one of their own, but life carried on. However, he was no longer the same man who had left. The changes were subtle at first, but then becoming more apparent until people began to disappear. Fear began to spread like wildfire, and when the chief's daughter vanished, no one in the village could longer ignore the truth. A hunting party was formed to track down the missing girl. The trail led the party to a nearby cave, where they found the little girl among other human remains.
He paused once again, his weary eyes filled with the heaviness of the tale.
What we found there, what he had become.
He shook his head slowly.
His body, it was no longer human. Its skin was white as the snow. His limbs stretched like bare branches, and antlers crowned his skull. We managed to kill it, burn the body, but some nights, I still see his face.
His words hit me like winter's cruelest wind. All these years, I'd sat by this fire, begging for monster stories, never knowing I was asking my uncle to relive his darkest nightmare. The tremor in his hands, the deep lines etched on his face, that haunted look that had always perplexed me. They weren't marks of age, but scars from a horror too personal to imagine.
The monster, the Wendigo.
Uncle Nodin said, his voice breaking.
He was my brother who had succumbed to the curse. After the cleansing ritual, we sealed the cave and left those unholy grounds. Adizuk Iko is what we called it, the place of dark spirits. Some say you can still hear him when winter storms rage, and sometimes the hungry answer.
Years later, the memory of that winter hunt still loomed large. That day, Animosh, my cousin, and I were tracking a magnificent elk across the snow-covered plains. The animal was swift, leading us on a relentless chase. Suddenly, a deafening sound, louder than a thunderclap, echoed through the forest. I turned to look at Animosh, who had an expression akin to terror. His eyes wide, his body rigid, staring at something beyond me. I caught sight of several figures emerging from behind the trees. Their faces were pale like death, and they all wore the same blue garments, as if they were part of the same tribe. They carried long sticks that spewed smoke. As the pale faces men pointed those sticks at us, a bright light blinded me momentarily. Animosh fell to the ground, as if hit by an invisible arrow. Then, another crack of thunder. I felt fire in my chest, and the world turned upside down. As I regained consciousness, I was met with the cold, lifeless gaze of Animosh. The same eyes that used to be filled with energy and vitality were now empty and dull, and his once colorful complexion was now as white as the snow outside. I looked around and saw more familiar faces of my native brothers and sisters, all lying among the deceased. With horror, I realized I was on a cart among rows of the dead and dying. As the hours passed, more thunders shook the air, and more bodies joined us on the cart, still warm, their blood seeping into my clothes. The stench of death, my own included, became a constant companion. My chest throbbed from where the thunderstick had struck, and each breath was a battle against the pain. When I finally gathered enough strength to push myself up, shoving aside a woman's cold form, I glimpsed the sight of Grandmother Moon in the sky above. I begged the spirits for salvation or the mercy of a swift death. They answered with more thunder, more screams, more bodies added to the pile. Then came the jolt. The cart tilted, and before I could react, I was falling. Bodies cascaded around me as I plunged into darkness. I hit the bottom of a pit with bone-crushing force, yet somehow remained conscious. Then, the cart disappeared and I was left there, trapped beneath a suffocating mass of the dead, the only living thing in this makeshift grave. Is this the end for me? Am I going to die here, forgotten, under a mountain of corpses? I tried to shift position, but pain shot through my left ankle. The fall had done more damage than I first realized. The first day, I found strips of dried deer meat in my pouch, a hunter's precaution. It didn't last long. Snow filtered down through gaps between the bodies, my only source of water, but it tasted of blood and dirty. By the second day, all the snow I could gather was gone or too fouled to drink it. I tried to focus on survival, on happy memories. I thought of quieter times, of crackling fires and the low murmur of Uncle Newton's voice. His stories of the hunt, of bravery in the face of winter's fury. But as the sixth day dawned, those memories brought a different kind of warmth, the warmth of desperation. Could it be? Could my uncle's tales offer an answer to my situation? The hunger clawed at my insides, consuming every thought. Was this how it began for my uncle's brother? As the darkness deepened, the thought grew less horrifying and more tempting. Perhaps the Wendigo wasn't just a monster, but a survivor, a creature who bent the rules to survive the harshest winter. My hands moved of their own accord, driven by hunger deeper than thought. The first bite was a violation, a betrayal of everything I once held dear. Yet with each subsequent morsel, something changed within me. Strength seeped back into my limbs. The wound on my chest throbbed with a perverse sense of healing. Then came the pain. It started in my bones, a sickening sensation of grinding and shifting. My fingers stretched first, elongating like melting wax. Then my arms, my legs, each joint cracking and reforming. My skin pulled tight against this new frame, turning pale as winter moonlight. I felt my face change last, my jaw extending, my eyes sinking deeper into their sockets, my teeth reshaping themselves into points meant for tearing flesh. As my body twisted and elongated, I felt more than just the physical change. Something ancient stirred in the darkness around me. The wind that whistled through the cracks of the pit carried whispers in languages lost to time. My skin, now pale as death, tingled with each icy gust. This was something beyond the Wendigo tales my uncle had told, something that existed before winter itself, before the first snows fell. The hunger was all that I felt now. I knew that my hunger was no longer just my own. It was an extension of this entity's insatiable appetite, a hunger vast enough to swallow the world. Then I remember Anamash. His lifeless face flashed in my mind, fueling a searing hatred that burned brighter than the sun. I clawed my way out of the pit of death, determined to seek revenge. It only took a few moments for me to identify the scent of those who did this to me and to Anamash. It filled my nostril like a disgusting perfume, yet impossible for me to run away. What followed exists in my memory like fragments of a nightmare. The moon cast everything in silver light, turning blood black where it sprayed across the snow. My new form moved with terrible grace, each strike precise, each kill methodical. The soldiers' screams echoed through the trees, then fell silent one by one. When the violence ended, the forest held its breath. No owl dared hoot, no wolf dared howl. The only sound was the steady drip-drip of blood from my elongated fingers, each drop boring a perfect crimson hole in the pristine snow. Their bodies lay scattered across the clearing like broken dolls, their faces frozen in expressions of horror at what I had become. I stood victorious but wholly alone. Somehow I didn't feel sated by their deaths, and the revenge I had sought felt hollow and meaningless. With deliberate slowness, I bent down to one of the bodies, a man whose once proud posture was now twisted in death's stiffening hold. His eyes were wide open in terror, staring at the monstrous creature he had helped create. I dragged him back towards the pit, his body leaving a dark trail in the snow. One by one, I gathered up the others who had met their end at my hands and deposited them into the very pit they had doomed me to. I began to head back toward my village, but stopped. What place did I have among them now? I was no longer Mashkawizi. I was something else entirely, a creature born out of desperation and revenge. So I wandered the wilderness instead. For how long I do not know, but one thing held on to me tight: hunger. Then, one crisp evening, a familiar scent drifted on the wind, a sweet, comforting aroma that stirred something in my memories. It was the smell of wood smoke, of roasting meat, of home. I stood at the edge of the forest, bathed in the ethereal glow of the moon. Down below, nestled in the valley, lay my tribe. Laughter and the sounds of children playing drifted upwards. And there, by the crackling fire, sat Uncle Newton, his back turned, his silver hair gleaming in the moonlight, much more older than I remembered. A primal hunger flared in my gut, but something else stirred within me, an ember of the man I used to be. I licked my lips, the taste of ash and decay metallic on my tongue. Tonight, I will feed.
And so, dear listeners, the tattered book closes on this chilling tale of a man consumed by forces beyond his comprehension. But remember, when the winter winds howl and hunger gnaws at your belly, beware the call of the Windwalker. For in the vastness of cosmic horror, we are all but morsels waiting to be devoured. If you dare to delve deeper into these eldritch mysteries, subscribe to our podcast, leave a rating and review, and whisper of our tales to others. Your engagement feeds the book, fueling the terrors yet to come. Until next time, and may your nights be sleepless and your dreams unsettling.